The clock on the corner of the screen slips from 9:11 to 9:12 as my second chart blooms. Light from the tall windows spills across the conference table and turns the polished wood into a calm river. The room is high above Boston, all glass and quiet power. I speak 3 words before another voice folds over mine. We will pause here. The technician watches the vice president at the far end of the table. His thumb rests on the mixer. I see the decision arrive in his eyes before his hand moves. The small green dot on my microphone turns red. 1 breath ago, I owned the air. Now the air belongs to someone else. I do not argue. I take the cable out. The line on the screen freezes mid-curve, like a runner stopped by a hand on the shoulder. People shuffle pages. Someone stirs a spoon against porcelain, and the sound feels louder than it should. I gather my laptop and step away. Leon thanks the room for their patience and promises a strategic view from leadership. The word strategic hangs in the air like a hotel painting that no one looks at, but everyone agrees to leave on the wall. The door closes behind me, and my reflection follows me down the hall. The carpet is a soft blue that never shows footprints. It gives nothing away. I walk fast enough to feel the beat of my steps and slow enough to look like I am simply busy. I have been here long enough to know the choreography. You leave a room as if you expected to leave it. My desk sits by the window that looks over the river. The river is a gray ribbon today. A mug waits beside my notebook. I sit, open the notebook, and write 2 words. Due bill. I underline them once. Not hard. I look at the screen and log back into the project space. The folder tree opens like a story told backward. Commits, diffs, access logs, names with timestamps. It is the only language in this building that says what it means and remembers what it said. I rename a few files in ways that slow the eye of a person who is used to skim. Revenue dependency lattice with operational conditions. Customer trust continuity checklist with evidence. Execution environment notes with staff mapping. I put them under a new root. The root has a name that cannot be folded into a slide. The story of a model when you pull out the person who understands it. My coffee is cold. That is fine. I take a sip anyway and make a face, and then put the mug down on the coaster with the company logo. New mail arrives in a neat line. Subject lines from a Tier 1 client who signs checks in steady digits. They do not ask for a leadership vision. They ask when I will attend the next technical review. They ask why I was not in the room this morning. They ask about one specific test I run every other Friday that leaves a small but important green check in their internal dashboard. I star the messages and leave them unanswered for now. I am not stalling. I am placing the answers where they cannot be erased. A quiet knock at my open door. Marcus from IT leans on the frame. He wears a graduation cap on the wolf that decorates his mug. He speaks softly. Do you want hard delete protection on anything? Yes. Put it on the Atlas folders and everything under them. Log every download with duration. And Marcus, please record any failed delete attempts with user detail. He nods once and lifts the wolf in a small salute and leaves. His steps are so light that I hear the coffee machine in the pantry more than I hear him. I turn back to the keyboard and begin a short message. Finance, legal, risk. I paste the link to the new tree and add 2 short lines. References for this afternoon board session. Please note version history and operational conditions related to client relationships. Send. The reply from finance arrives within minutes. A question about why Leon's forecast outpaces the original by $5 million for the quarter. I insert a screenshot. A small clause in gray under the forecast cell that says the assumption is valid only if the technical reviews continue with the current lead in place. The clause points to my name without spelling it. Repetition of work is its own signature. Legal writes next. A note about licensing for the model code. I attach a 1-page diagram that shows the license terms and the dependency on maintaining the principal developer during transition. Legal says they will pull a small group into a quick huddle. I feel my jaw unclench a little. The phone vibrates. A number I do not know. I let it ring twice, then I answer. The voice is cool and completely unhurried. If you want board-level delete protection, tag the root with executive review. Who are you? Call me Raven. I do not like accepting favors from someone who will not show their face. Sometimes the best favor is a warning that never existed. The line clicks and the call dies before I can say more. I look back at the screen. The tag is already there. I did not add it. The log shows a change from a network segment that sits above pay grades that have carpets even softer than the one under my chair. I remember the look of a board member in the hall last month, something measuring and a little curious. It might be that person. It might be someone else. It does not matter yet. What matters is that from now on, every open and every download will write its own witness statement. My calendar is a map of the last year and a half, marked by trips that did not fit neatly into slides. Last week, New York. A room so cold we wore jackets in July. We chased a data leak through a pipeline that looked fine on paper and misbehaved when someone leaned on it in the wrong place. I keep a simple text file for things that never make it into decks. Who prefers coffee black and who says they do but adds sugar when no one is looking? Who will sign if the call is before 5 and who will always push a call that begins after 5:15? Who will not agree if a certain person is in the room? Those notes are not pretty. They are essential. The model knows none of it, yet it falls down without it. People call this soft knowledge. It is soft in the way a ligament is soft. Cut it and see what happens to the knee. Another message from finance. The board requests numbers with conditions attached by this afternoon. I answer with the same link and a sentence. Real numbers need real conditions. I stand and take my laptop to a small huddle room with a door that works better than the others. I like the quiet there. I place my notebook on the table and write one sentence. I will speak in the language they claim to respect, and I will make them hear every word. Marcus slips in without knocking and gives me a thumbs up. It is set. Every open, every attempt to delete, the length of each view, you will have it all. He grins and then he pauses. They are already downloading like rain, he says, like the first rain of the season when the ground is dry and you can smell the dust lift. I smile. When he leaves, I open the log view and watch the names and timestamps begin to fall. A rhythm of curious eyes and worried hands. Leon does not have the right to open the root. He tries from his machine. He tries from a tablet. He tries from a phone. He fails 3 times in a line like a pattern drawn by a child. I capture the screen and place the image in an appendix folder, not out of spite, out of habit. Every claim should be able to point to something. An invitation pops into my inbox. A preparation meeting for tonight with the board, marked urgent and after hours. I read the time twice. I type a short reply. I have a prior commitment this evening. All materials required are in the system. I am confident you will prepare well. No explanation, no apology. I send the message and put the phone face down on the table. If they wanted my voice, they should not have cut it. The river outside changes color with the cloud. Then it changes back. The day keeps moving. I put on a track without words. Piano that does not apologize for being plain. The names in the log continue to drop in steady lines. I feel a strange calm. Anger would be easy and would do very little. Calm takes more work and lets the work matter. I go downstairs for lunch and order clam chowder by habit. The man behind the counter knows my order and not my name. That is one of the quiet freedoms of a large company. You can be known and unknown at once. I stand by the window while they ladle the soup. My phone buzzes with a message from a client contact who uses too many ellipses when he texts. He wants to be sure I will be on the call next week. I tell him yes. I omit the details about microphones and red dots and strategy. Clients do not want the kitchen. They want the meal to arrive warm and the table to be steady when they lean on it. Back upstairs, the log shows something new. A burst of access from a floor that does not often visit our project space. Risk is awake. Legal is awake. Finance was never asleep. The system draws a quiet picture of worry that no one will admit out loud. I make a small list of what each group needs in order to move faster without stepping on landmines. Numbers paired with notes. Conditions paired with contacts. If I hand each group the ingredient they trust, they will stop pretending the meal cooks itself. A new call comes in. This time the name displays on the screen. The chief executive does not like to leave voicemails. I let it ring twice as before and then answer. Are you still in the office? Yes, we need to talk about this morning. We can talk this afternoon. I prefer the afternoon. Silence. The kind that comes when someone is counting to 3 before they react. Then a measured exhale. Very well. This afternoon. The call ends. I do not feel triumphant. I feel like I have moved a chess piece that had to be moved, and now we have to see what the other side does. I look at my notebook. I write a second sentence below the first. I will ask for what is mine without raising my voice. The afternoon brings a quick meeting with finance and legal and risk in a small room that smells faintly of printer toner. I show them the tree on the screen. I show them the conditional cells and the clause language. I do not say the words mine or me or I built. I let the files speak. The human voices in the room change. They begin at tense and climb to brisk. In the space of 10 minutes, the danger moves from me to the people who tried to change numbers without moving the work that makes numbers true. After the meeting, I walk the long way back to my desk. I pass the big conference room. Behind the glass wall, I see Leon standing with his hands on the back of a chair, looking down at a color printout. He nods while someone speaks to him. He nods again when no one is speaking. I keep walking. I do not need that picture in my head. I have enough pictures already. At my desk, I open the slide deck I did not get to show. I slide out 2 charts and replace them with 3 simple screens. One shows the lattice of revenue dependencies with the real-world hooks that hold it together. Conversation cadence, trust continuity, integration health. The second screen shows a week in the life of that lattice. The small checks that keep it standing. The third screen shows what falls when those checks are removed and what it takes to lift the thing back onto its feet. I save the deck under a name that tells the truth. Not vision, operation, not story, evidence. A chat pops up from Marcus. He asks if I want a live demo environment ready to go for the board. I reply yes and ask him to set the knobs so that one wrong setting breaks something visible but not dangerous. He replies with a smiley face and the word done. Marcus likes the small theater of a good demo. So do I. People remember what they see break and then heal in front of them. They forget what did not move them. The elevator chimes down the hall. The sound is neutral, and yet you can tell the difference between a normal chime and the one that means important people are hopping between floors. The log reflects it. New names land with time intervals that match the ride between the top floors and the one with the coffee machine. Late afternoon arrives like a coin placed on a table. Everyone knows what it is worth without touching it. I turn off the music and close my eyes for a count of 10. When I open them, there is a new message on my screen from the executive assistant to the chief executive. A request for a brief phone call before the board session. It is polite. It is not optional. I accept with a time that suits me, not the time offered. A small thing. Small things add up. When the phone rings, I answer on the first chime. The voice is the same as at noon, only more careful. We will need your help tonight. I will present the real model and its real conditions. I want the following recorded in the minutes and in the video archive. Attribution of authorship for the design. Authorization for me to lead the deployment and the ongoing reviews. A corrective note attached to the leadership deck that used my numbers without my conditions. There is a pause. You are making demands. I am making the work safe to use. Another pause. Very well. Send the exact language to legal. I already did. Of course you did. The call ends. I place the phone on the table and look out at the river. The light is softer now. The water is more silver than gray. I always forget how quickly the afternoon swings when a day holds its breath. An alert pings from the system. A new tag appears on the root of my folder tree. Executive Review now displays with a small lock icon that I did not place. I check the log and see the path it took. A short hop from a machine that lives behind a gate I have never walked through. I take a screenshot and add it to my notes. I do not send it to anyone. This is not a threat or a gift. It is a sign that the game board is wider than my desk. Evening approaches. People go home. Some pretend to go home and stay. The building gets quieter and more honest. I gather my deck, the notes, and the small props a demo always needs. A cable that never fails. A pair of fresh markers for the whiteboard because the ones in the room will be dry. A printed list of the 3 checks that prove the lattice stands on more than slides. Before I leave my desk, I open the log one more time. Names continue to fall like a light rain. One name stands out by its absence. Leon is not in the log. He is somewhere else, perhaps in a room with people who think rooms solve more than they do. I close the log and lock my screen. On my way to the elevators, I pass a cleaner who is wiping the same circle on the same table with patient strokes. The smell of lemon follows me into the hall. I like that smell. It is the smell of last steps done right. The elevator opens to the floor where the board meets. The hall is wider here and the art on the walls costs more. I walk past a mirror that stretches from floor to ceiling. I meet my own eyes for a second and hold them there. I am not here to win a fight. I am here to make the truth usable. I step into the waiting area outside the boardroom. The assistant smiles a tense smile that means we are running late. The doors open a moment later and people flow out to take calls and drink water. The chief executive waves me in with 2 fingers, not unkind. The table inside is set with small bottles and thick paper and pens that are heavier than they look. The screen on the wall shows the leadership deck on a title slide. I hand my drive to the technician and ask him to bring up my deck after the first 2 minutes. He nods. A board member with calm eyes takes a seat near the end of the table and studies me for a beat. It might be the gaze I remember from the hallway last month. It might be someone else. I am not hunting faces. I am placing facts. The room settles, the doors close. The camera on the far wall wakes with a tiny red light. I take one breath, not to calm down, to start. When I speak this time, the microphone stays green. I own the air again, not because anyone gave it back, but because I brought my own language with me and set it on the table where everyone can see it. I return to my floor with the calm that comes after a storm that has not yet arrived. The hallway lights are softer now. The building exhales. I set my laptop down and unlock the screen. The project space opens like a cathedral with no priest and a congregation of logs. I begin to assemble what I call the invisible invoice. It is not a threat. It is a translation. The work speaks in actions, and I will put those actions into a grammar the board cannot ignore. First, I open the version history and mark the moments when the lattice changed shape. Each moment ties to a conversation or a night spent watching a pipeline wobble at 2 in the morning. I write 3 lines beside each commit. What changed? Why it changed? Who depended on the change without knowing it? The story is simple. The model you want to parade at the end of the quarter stands on a platform made of calls and checks and habits. Remove those and revenue is a picture of a bridge without concrete. I build a second branch from emails. I sift for the messages that show trust in motion. The client who copied me on a message to his boss and said she is the one who makes the red lights turn green. The operations manager who wrote at 6 on a Sunday morning to say the new routine caught an error before it became a fire. The compliance officer who said keep the notes neat because the auditors have sharp pencils. I do not write adjectives. I paste the lines and timestamps and let the dates be the verbs. Next, I open the folder no one sees when we present. It holds the fragments that do not fit into boast or blame, the small map of people. The way a simple check on a Wednesday calms a person in a distant room on a Friday. The fact that a call is not just a call when the person on the other end has learned to breathe normally again because the voice that answers is a voice that does not waste time. You cannot print any of this on a slide without making it sentimental. You can show what happens to systems when you remove it. That is the point. Finance pings my window. They want a version of the forecast that matches the deck and a side-by-side view that reflects my conditions. I create 2 tables. In the left column, I place the leadership forecast in clean numbers. In the right column, I place the numbers under the condition that the checks continue with the person who knows where the bones are. The gap is 5 million. It is not a cliff. It is a staircase. It shows how the numbers climb only when someone lifts them one step at a time in ways that do not bend the knees. Legal asks for proof of the license terms applied to code that began as personal work and now runs in a corporate environment. I open the original license file and the amendment that followed when the project became a product. I highlight the clause that links usage to continuity of maintainers during deployment. I add a short paragraph that describes the spirit of the clause. The company can hire a second lead if they want. They can train one. They cannot pretend the work came from nowhere simply because the file is inside a folder with the company logo. Risk sends a calendar hold for an emergency review. I accept and join from my desk. The room is a grid of faces. Some look tired. Some look interested. Some look like they never thought they would speak to me. I share my screen and walk them through the tree. I show the places where a process exists only because someone made a habit and wrote it down. I show the places where a habit was never written down and needs to be. Risk people like maps when the legend is honest. They ask for a 1-page list of checks that must not be skipped. I agree and add a small note at the bottom. Skipping is not always the problem. Replacement without trust is worse. When the call ends, I craft a message for the client contacts who wrote in the morning. I tell them I will lead their technical review next week as planned. I add that our internal schedule is under discussion and that the work will not be interrupted. I keep the sentences short. People believe short sentences from a person who usually writes long ones only when long ones are useful. Marcus sends me a link to the demo environment and the last test he ran. One knob in the wrong position turns a green tile on the dashboard into a gray one. I smile. The board will not remember the names of the knobs, but they will remember the gray tile. They will remember the silence in the room when it turns gray and the small sound it makes when it returns to green. The sound is in the throat. The sound is relief. I check the log again and see a series of failed attempts to remove files from my tree. The system records each attempt with a user name and a reason. The reason is simple, not permitted. The names are not surprising. An assistant who carries a calendar like a shield. A director who thinks files are suggestions. I take another screenshot. I do not share it yet. There will be a moment when the board asks how I know what I know. I will show them a page that cannot be argued with, not because it is clever, because it is boring in the honest way. At 6, the floor empties. The sky leans toward blue that looks like a new bruise. The lights hum. I stand and stretch, and the tendons in my neck remind me that calm is a choice I keep making. My mother would call to ask if I have eaten. I have. She would remind me that work is work and people are people, and sometimes you have to carry the difference like a bucket of water and not spill any even when someone bumps you. I make tea I will not finish and place the mug where the steam will not touch the keyboard. A message arrives from a number that has no name. The text is 4 words. Use the board camera. I look at the wall in the boardroom in my memory. The camera is small and polite and always on when the light is red. The message is not news. The tone makes it feel like a warning. I answer with 1 word. Understood. There is no reply. I draft the exact language I want in the minutes. Attribution of authorship for the design and the core routines. Authorization for me to lead the deployment and the bi-weekly reviews. A corrective note appended to the leadership presentation that uses my numbers with the conditions removed. I read the paragraph aloud. It sounds like a manual. That is good. The minutes are not poetry. They are a receipt. I send the paragraph to legal with a subject that is easy to search later. I copy the chief executive and the chair of the board and no one else. I attach the 2 tables for finance and the 1 page for risk. I include the link to the tree again for any person who missed it and still wants to pretend they did not see it. The send key makes a soft sound. The kind of sound that means the burden is now shared by the system. As the minute hand climbs, I print a slim stack of pages. The lattice screen, the week in the life of the checks. The 3 mistakes that break the demo in safe ways. The table that shows the 5 million as both a promise and a warning. I slide the pages into a folder and label the folder with a date. No adjectives. The date will matter more than any title later. On the way to the elevator, I pass Leon again. He steps out of a side room as if the room pushed him. We look at each other for a breath. He begins to speak. I raise a hand, not rude, firm. We can talk after the session. He opens his mouth and closes it. The elevator arrives and I step in. The doors pretend to close in slow motion. They always pretend. Then they close fast at the end. The board floor is quieter now. I enter the anteroom and set my folder on the table. The assistant offers water. I accept and take a small sip and set the bottle down on the coaster as if I do this every day. The technician nods. He is the same one from the morning. I tell him I will do the demo when I say the word. He nods again. He understands DMOS. He knows the difference between a show and a test. The chief executive comes out to meet me. He looks like a man who has argued with a mirror and lost by 1 point. He leads me in and the room reforms around the table. The camera light wakes red. The chair of the board speaks a short open. Leadership begins to present. The first slide looks like a magazine cover. The second looks like a promise made to people who want to believe in promises. At the 3rd slide, the chair lifts a hand and turns to me. I stand and walk to the center and plug in my drive. The lattice blooms on the screen, not as art but as a map. I do not smile, I do not frown. I tell the room that we will look at 3 things. What holds the model up? What makes it fall? What keeps it standing after we leave this room? I move through the week of checks and the small acts of maintenance that keep the lights the right color. I ask Marcus in the back to nudge the first knob. A tile grays out. The room hears the silence. I wait a beat. I ask him to return the knob. The tile turns green again. The room hears the sound in their throats and calls it relief without using the word. I show the table with the 2 columns. I say the left column is a picture. The right column is a picture with gravity. I let the numbers sit without decoration. The chair asks who wrote the clause that ties the forecast to the reviews. Legal answers. They know the file. They know the date. They know the signature. They say the clause is standard and unusual in the same breath. Standard because it belongs in every place where a model touches money. Unusual because not many people remember to keep it in the deck. Questions come. They are not hostile. They are sharp. I welcome sharp. A dull question wastes life. I answer with the files and the logs and the times that live in the edges. I never say the word ownership. I point to places where the system says I was there and I did this and other people did not. The system has no ego. That is why it is the best witness. The chair asks about the leadership deck that used my numbers without the conditions. The chief executive looks at his notes. He says this was an oversight. The word oversight sits on the table and tries to behave. I add one sentence. We will attach a corrective note to the video and to the minutes so that the oversight cannot travel without its shadow. The chair nods. The secretary of the board writes something in a neat hand. I close with a simple map of what we will do next. This is not a vision. It is a list of chores that keep the machine clean. Clean is not glamorous. Clean pays. I ask for the 3 items already in the email to be recorded in the minutes and in the archive. Attribution, authorization, correction. The chair looks at legal. Legal looks at the paragraph I sent. The chair says yes. In the corner of the screen, I see a small icon appear on the root of my folder tree. Executive review sits with a lock that was not there before tonight and now looks like it belongs there. I do not point at it. I do not need to. The camera sees it. The minutes will carry it. The invoice is now a document and not a feeling. The session ends. People rise with the weight of decisions on their shoulders and the relief that someone else will carry them to the elevator. The chief executive thanks me with a voice that works hard to be even. The chair shakes my hand and says nothing and means more that way. I pack the cable and the markers and the printed pages. I leave one page on the table by accident on purpose. The page with the 2 columns. The person who finds it will think they discovered something. That always helps. Outside the doors, the assistant smiles for real for the first time today. The technician gives me a small nod that says the demo landed where it needed to. I press the elevator button and feel the soft click. As I wait, my phone buzzes. A text from the same number as before. 4 new words. Good use of silence. I do not reply. The elevator arrives and I step in. On the ride down, I watch my reflection in the metal and remember the 2 words I wrote in my notebook in the morning. Due bill. Tonight I handed it across the table without raising my voice. The bill is not paid yet. Payment takes the form of signatures and rolls and the habit of telling the truth even when truth is inconvenient. But the bill is now in the right hands. That is the beginning. Back at my desk, the city is a field of quiet stars. I sit and add a line under the 2 words. Send receipt in the morning. Then I close the notebook and turn off the lamp and let the system keep watching while I walk out into the night. Morning arrives with the color of metal and the sound of email. I unlock my screen, and the project space greets me with the same calm face it wore last night. The log viewer is still open where I left it. Names begin to fall again as if nothing ever stops in a system that is fed by worry. Finance pulls the tables. Legal opens the license diagram. Risk clicks the checklist twice in 5 minutes as if the second click will make the world steadier than the first. The leader deck is now stamped with a corrective note in the archive. The red light on the board camera last night made sure of that. I breathe once and taste coffee I have not yet poured. My phone displays a calendar block I did not accept and did not reject. Leon wants a prep meeting at 9 with selected stakeholders. The word selected is doing a lot of work. I close the invite. I am not the muscle for a story that leaves out the bones. My meeting is at 10 with the Tier 1 client who wrote on Sunday at 6 in the morning. I will bring the person who actually watches the valves and not the person who stands at the valve and smiles. At 8:30, I write 3 lines on the whiteboard in a small room where the light is kind. What holds the model up? What makes it fall? What keeps it standing after we leave the room? The 3 lines look like the beginning of a prayer written by a practical person. Marcus slides in and sets a spare cable on the ledge. He does not ask if I need it. He knows a spare is not an insult. It is respect for entropy. 9 comes and goes. I see movement through glass where Leon has gathered directors around a round table that was never built for arguments. Hands point. Heads tilt. Pages shuffle. I do not go in. The log shows their names in my tree as if the tree were a quiet witness seated just outside the room. I take a picture of the whiteboard and send it to myself. Then I erase the surface in 3 slow passes. Clean boards make clear minds. The client call at 10 begins with weather and moves to business like a train leaving a station on time. I share the lattice map and the week in the life of checks. I keep my voice at the speed of thought and not the speed of panic. The operations manager on the other end laughs once when Marcus moves the harmless knob and a tile goes gray. He does not laugh when it returns to green. He exhales. There is a difference. We agree on dates and the order of work and the names of people who need to see the notes. We do not use the word trust. We do not need to. Trust is the quiet that follows a sentence that lands square. After the call, I take the stairs down 1 floor and walk the long corridor where the windows face east. Sun pushes itself through the glass and warms the carpet in slow rectangles. 2 analysts from another team pass me and lower their voices as if my presence makes detail contagious. I nod and keep walking. In the pantry, a new box of tea sits open with a handwritten note that says, "Please do not take the whole box." Someone always takes the whole box. I take one packet and tuck it in my pocket for later. Back at my desk, a message waits from legal. The minutes are posted. The language I sent appears in the record without adjectives. Attribution recorded. Authorization granted. Correction attached. I read the lines twice and once more for the road. There is no victory rush. There is only the feeling of a door that swings all the way shut after days of a draft that rattled the frame. Another message arrives from finance. The board wants a plain language summary of the dependency lattice for the next operating review. They use the phrase plain language and do not put it in quotes. I appreciate that. I write the summary with the tone you use when you explain a recipe to a person who does not cook. Heat is not a number. It is a relationship between flame and pan and food and time. Our model behaves the same way. Keep the flame steady. Keep the pan honest. Stir when the texture tells you to stir, and not when the spoon tells you to stir. I pair each metaphor with the real-world action it stands for. No one can claim they were taught in a dream. I send the document and walk to the far end of the floor where a small room with frosted glass offers a view of the river like a postcard. I sit in the corner and let the phone rest on the arm of the chair. It vibrates with a message that has no name again. One sentence. Noise level rising on your floor. I look up. Through the frosted glass, I can see only shapes, but the shapes look like people who forgot to sit before they began to speak. I reply with a single word. Noted. The phone stays quiet. When I return, the noise is contained, but the air remembers it. Leon stands by my desk with a polite smile that is tired around the eyes. He asks if we can put the recent corrections behind us and focus on a unified message. I say yes, a unified message is good, and the message should reflect the model as it runs in the world and not the model as it appears in an illustration. He says of course, and then asks if I might consider letting his team take the next client demo while I concentrate on internal hardening. I ask which team member will answer when the client asks why the Thursday check moved from the morning slot to the afternoon slot 2 months ago and what impact that had on the reconciliation window. He opens his mouth and closes it. He says we can align on talking points. I say we can align on people who know which pipes carry gas and which carry water. The conversation ends with a nod that means not tonight and not never. At noon, I sit with Marcus in the small cafeteria with the view of the marina. He eats fast and talks slow. He tells me he has seen 5 access attempts fail in the last 2 hours and 3 succeed in an adjacent folder with older permissions that no one remembered to tighten. He tightened them. He logged the change. He sent a note to the team that owns the folder. He expects a thank you that will not come. We talk about small things, the new espresso machine, the plant near the window that refuses to live. He says he is going to name the plant Persistence and see if that helps. In the afternoon, I hold a short clinic for younger analysts who are not on my team but always find their way to my doorway with sticky questions. We do not talk about politics. We talk about questions that begin with how and end with when. How do you know which check to make manual for a month before you trust the automated one? When do you escalate, and when do you own, and when do you let a system fail in a safe box so that everyone can see the shape of the failure? I tell them to collect small receipts in files with dates and not opinions. I tell them to write notes that would still be true if their name were removed. That is the discipline that keeps a person upright when a room tries to turn them into an outline on a slide. Just before 3, the chief executive asks me to join a short call with a board member. The screen opens on a face I have seen before in the hallway, but never this close. The eyes are calm and carry a kind of curiosity that does not need to own what it looks at. We speak about the corrective note, and the demo, and the simple list at the end. The board member asks me what failure looks like in a way that a lay person could recognize from across the street. I say failure looks like a green dashboard on a day when the phones are ringing. Green can lie. People cannot. The board member nods once and ends the call without goodbye in a way that feels efficient and not rude. I return to the log and watch a new pattern. Downloads come in clusters now, 5 names in 10 seconds, and then nothing for 2 minutes as if a small committee is reading over one shoulder. The executive review tag on the root adds a shiny lock icon that I have never seen in this interface before. I did not place it, and Marcus did not place it, and yet it fits there like a key in a door that was always meant to be used. At 4, I take the elevator to the lobby to reset my eyes. The security guard nods and goes back to a crossword. Outside the revolving doors, a truck idles, and the driver looks down at his phone and smiles in an unguarded way. The city smells like hot concrete and roasted nuts from a cart I cannot see. I stand still in the shade and then I go back upstairs. When I step out of the elevator, the hallway is quieter and the air is cooler and both feel temporary. An email waits from Leon. He would like me to share the demo script and the 3 checks with his team so they can practice. I send a copy of the script with the sections marked that depend on knowledge you cannot fake. They do not look special on the page. They will look special in the room when someone cannot answer a question whose answer lives in the scar tissue of a long night. I join a late meeting with legal to confirm the language around attribution and authorization is now in all the right places. The counsel who leads the call wears the patience of a person who has watched companies forget their own promises more times than there are months in a year. She says the record is clear and the video is posted and the correction sits exactly where it should. She thanks me for my clarity. I thank her for her pen. The sun gives up and the office lights pull the world into a flat calm. I collect my bag slowly as if speed would leave something behind. My notebook opens itself and I add a new line under the first 2. Make tomorrow dull. Dull is the opposite of crisis. Dull is wealth. As I close the notebook, the screen flickers with a notification that is not a notification I recognize. A small banner at the top of the project window says Executive Review Policy Applied. The words appear in a system font that does not know how to perform. The banner fades and leaves no button to click. I open the log. A new entry sits at the top. Policy update executed by a service account that belongs to a part of the company chart I have never been invited to see. The entry carries a comment I have also never seen in our environment. Scope raised to board preservation. That comment is not written by an engineer who likes clever phrases. It is written by someone who uses 6 words when 2 would do and believes the extra 4 provide cover. My phone vibrates on the desk. An unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. I answer on the 3rd as if some old superstition were in charge of my hand. Good afternoon, Elsa. Good afternoon. I enjoyed the quiet theater last night. The moment when the tile turned gray was especially persuasive. Who is this? A pause that measures me. A friend of clean systems. Call me Raven. I do not accept help I cannot audit. Of course you do not. That is why I chose you. Consider this a courtesy call. You have created something sturdier than a slide. That attracts gravity. People who enjoy moving objects with their hands will notice. Some of them will think they can pick up what you made without learning where to hold it. They will fail. They will also try again. You should know that your folders are now under board preservation. Accidental deletion will make more noise than a fire alarm. Who did that? Another small pause, enough to tell me the answer has more than one layer. Someone who prefers mirrors to shields. For now, let the mirror stand. What do you want? To see whether you will place a standard in the middle of the room or carry one in your pocket and trade it when the price is right. I do not trade standards. Then we will speak again. The line goes quiet as if the room itself pressed a finger to its lips. I keep the phone near my ear for one more breath and then put it down on the desk as if it might bruise. I stare at the log. The service account sits there like a single footprint on a clean floor. It is easy to over-interpret a footprint. It is dangerous to ignore one. I think of the 3 lines on the whiteboard and of the way the tile went gray and the way a room full of people felt their throats move when it went back to green. I think of the banner that arrived and left with no button and of a person who calls themselves a bird that watches from above. I think of the sentence the voice chose, mirrors and shields. Someone wants me to stand in front of something heavy so that when the weight falls, I will be the cushion and they will be the story. I shut the laptop and listen to the hum that lives in the building after people go home. It sounds like 1,000 careful engines buried in the walls. I open the laptop again and type a short note to myself. There's a difference between a warning and a leash. I will treat every gift like a wire until I can see both ends of it. The screensaver tries to start and gives up when I touch the trackpad. I open the log one last time. The pattern has shifted. Fewer names, longer views. The calm that follows a public correction is not peace. It is a pause in which people choose who they are. My eyes land on the top entry again. Scope raised to board preservation. The 6 words do not explain themselves. They do not need to. Their meaning is felt in the way my ribs lift when I breathe. There is a chair in the small room with the kind light where I began my morning. I walk there and sit and look at the city. The river is black glass. Cars move under the building in perfect obedience to lights that do not care who drives. A question forms itself with the shape of a tool. Who is Raven and who do they serve, and what will they ask of me the next time the phone rings? I let the question sit. Questions that large do not like to be chased. Someone is standing behind me inside the system. Night carries a different honesty than day. By 11, the office is a ship that has slipped its moorings. The hum in the vents sounds like water under a hull. I sit in the small room with the kind light and a view of the river and let my eyes rest on the dark glass. My phone vibrates on the arm of the chair. The hour glows at the top of the screen. 23:11. Good evening, Elsa. Good evening. We will need you to save the session tomorrow. The voice is steady. The space around it is not. I can hear the distance a person puts into a call when they want to seem calm and are not. I keep my own voice inside the line where my pulse cannot be heard. I will present the real model and the conditions under which it lives. I will need 3 things recorded in the minutes and stored in the video archive. First, authorship attribution for the design and core routines. Second, authorization for me to lead deployment and bi-weekly reviews with the client. Third, a corrective note appended to the leadership deck that used my numbers without the conditions. A pause. The kind that searches for an argument and finds only the sound of a clock. You are making demands. I am making the work safe to use. Send the exact language to legal. I already did. I will copy you and the chair. Another pause. Shorter, reluctant respect has a shape. I have seen it grow like frost on glass. Very well. Be in the boardroom at 8:45. The chair will open. You will follow the second slide. I will follow the moment the room is ready to see how things actually stand. The line goes quiet. No goodbye. I look at the phone as if it might answer a question I did not ask and then set it down on the table. My notebook lies open where I left it. I write a line that has no music in it. Boundaries turn rooms into places where truth can stand. I walk back to my desk and write the paragraph again in an email so simple it almost offends the screen. For the minutes and video archive. 1. Attribution of authorship for the design and core routines of the Atlas Lattice. 2. Authorization for me to lead deployment and the bi-weekly reviews with named client teams. 3. A corrective note attached to last night's leadership presentation reflecting the necessary operational conditions tied to the forecast. I send it to legal with a subject line that is a date and 3 letters. I copy the chief executive and the chair. Then I attach the 2 tables for finance and the 1-page checks for risk. I add the link to the folder tree again because repetition is the only friend of people who believe they are too busy to read. My computer fan whispers. The river turns its face and catches a small line of light from a long truck crossing the bridge. I remember the first time I stayed in a building like this after midnight. Another city. Another lattice that looked proud under a projector and weak under a hand. I was younger and my voice shook in ways I thought only microphones could hear. A veteran analyst took me to a diner with bright lights and bad pie and said 3 things. Protect your name with your notes. Protect your notes with your habits. Protect your habits with your boundaries. I did not understand then how much those 3 sentences weigh. I do now. The messaging window on my screen jumps. Marcus has set the demo environment to mirror production with 3 safe fault points. He leaves a line only an engineer would call friendly. Gray will arrive on cue. Green will follow as long as no one is lying. I thank him and ask for one more small thing. A read-only badge on the deck in the boardroom so that I can show the lock icon at the corner. He replies done and adds a tiny wolf face that makes me laugh once without sound. I pack slowly. Cable, markers, printed pages, a spare battery for a clicker I may choose not to use. I do not leave this to luck. I used up my allowance for luck in other rooms long ago. On the walk to the elevators, I pass the wall of framed photographs that celebrate years of service. The years line up with the faces the way rings line up in a cut tree. Some faces carry pride so clean it shines. Some carry a calculation that mistakes tenure for depth. I touch the frame at the far end without letting my finger leave a mark. My parents kept photographs in a shoebox under the bed. My father in a grease-stained shirt with a wrench he swore was older than me. My mother in shoes that squeaked after long shifts and a smile that told you the squeak did not matter. They did not like to hang pictures. They liked to hang coats and wash them and hang them again. I hear my mother say in the back of my head, work is work and people are people. Do not confuse them and do not let anyone else confuse you. The elevator doors open on the lobby. The night guard looks up from a crossword and nods. He wears the benevolent authority of a person who watches the same doors for years and knows which hours carry trouble and which carry peace. Outside the glass, the city breathes its late breath. I stand with the phone in my hand and a message arrives from a number that introduced itself earlier by not having a name. Bring your own mirror. Raven does not add punctuation. I stare at the words. A mirror shows what is there. A shield stops what is not welcome. People who like to move objects with their hands want mirrors for other people and shields for themselves. I type one word. Understood. Then I delete it and turn the phone face down. I do not feed birds in the dark. Sleep comes as it does on nights that matter. It arrives late and thin and works anyway. I wake at 5 to the color of the room tilting from night to morning. I make coffee and stare at the steam until it loses interest in being watched. I choose a plain jacket and comfortable shoes. I put the printed pages in a folder. I check the folder twice. I go to work. The building at 7:45 is an empty stage with a few lights on. The person at the reception desk has a book next to the keyboard with a paper clip holding the current page. I think about the luxury of a job that lets you finish a sentence while you are in the building that pays for your time. I ride up and the floor opens the way a mind opens after a good night of not thinking about work. I set my bag down and take the folder and the cable and the markers and walk down the hall. The board floor has a smell I have begun to associate with expensive pens. The assistant outside the room speaks in a tone that folds urgency into courtesy. She tells me the order again as if the order changes the truth. The technician plugs in the small box that turns my laptop into a picture on the wall. He asks if I want test audio. I ask him to say the word gray into the microphone and then the word green. He smiles without asking why and does it. The words bounce around the room and come back softer. The camera light sits dark like a calm eye. The chair arrives first and sets a leather folio on the table. A quiet man with exact movements. He shakes my hand and says he appreciated the economy of last night's demo. The chief executive arrives next with 2 directors attached by the gravity of a conversation they are pretending not to have. Leon comes in after that with a smile that wants to be read as a truce. I give him a nod that means I have no wish to fight and no time to perform. People take seats. The assistant places water. The door shuts. The camera wakes. The first 2 slides move by like clouds that plan to rain on someone else's field. The chair turns toward me with a small gesture. I step to the center and the map fills the screen. Before I speak, I set 1 sheet of paper on the table at the end nearest the chair. It is the table with 2 columns. I do not push it toward anyone. I let it sit where a hand can find it without making a show of finding it. Then I begin. We will look at 3 things. What holds the model up? What makes it fall? What keeps it standing after we leave the room? The lines feel like a recipe spoken to a person who cooked without a stove and learned to respect fire. I show the week of checks. I speak the names of routines the way a person speaks names of people they call at dawn when a pipe breaks. I ask Marcus to nudge a knob. The tile goes gray. The room hears the silence I promised. I do not look at anyone's face. I look at the screen and then at the logs. I ask for the knob to return. The tile turns green. The air leaves the collective throat of the table as 1 breath and 1 small sound. I show the clause under the forecast. Legal answers before anyone asks. The clause is valid. The clause was there. The clause will remain. I show the license diagram and the amendment. No one argues. I do not gloat. I do not have room in my pockets for any object that is not a tool. Questions arrive in the order one would expect. What is the backup for you if you are unavailable? What is the path to train a second lead? What risk do we carry if the client insists on a change of personnel? I answer in the same order. The backup exists and is documented and is not a clone of me because people are not clones. The path to train a second lead runs through weeks of boring tasks and long calls and written notes and is worth the effort if we decide to pay the cost. The risk is that we confuse the appearance of continuity with continuity and the dashboard stays green while the phones ring. I end where I began. Green can lie. People cannot. The chair looks at legal. Legal confirms the minutes will carry the 3 items. The technician marks the time stamp. The camera sees the lock icon at the corner of my deck when the executive review tag winks on and off as the system refreshes a permission behind the scenes. I do not point. I do not need to. The archive will speak for me when someone forgets what they agreed to. We finish. The room shifts in the way that means decisions have been made, and the next meeting will pretend to be about something else and be about this again. People stand. The chair thanks me with a nod. The chief executive says my name and then does not add a sentence because the sentence would have to be true and he is not ready to say one out loud. Leon waits by the door to say we will align later. I tell him I look forward to aligning on work that works. I step out into the hall. The assistant smiles with eyes that finally match her mouth. The technician gives me a small salute with the corner of his laptop. My phone buzzes. A calendar invite flashes with the word informal in its title and no room assigned. Off record. I decline without a note. The phone buzzes again with a message from the same number as before. Good morning. The mirrors are polished. Lunch at 1, off-site. Bring nothing you are not willing to lose. I look at the words until they blur and resolve. I consider the difference between a warning and a leash. I breathe once and type a sentence that is neither acceptance nor refusal. Standards belong in public rooms. 3 dots appear. They disappear. No reply arrives. I walk back to my floor with the folder under my arm and the cable in my pocket and the markers in my hand. The day outside the glass is bright and ordinary. The kind of day you would forget if not for a single sentence someone said that changed the direction of something heavy. I feel the weight of the thing that moved and the space it left behind. I set the folder on my desk and open the notebook and write a line that I will need later. If someone invites me into a room with no record, I will invite the record into the room. The clock on my screen moves toward noon. The office fills with the low, clean sound of people doing work they can explain. The invoice is now a set of minutes and a video and a lock on a folder and a table with 2 columns that someone will pretend to find later. I let the calm arrive. Calm does not mean safe. Calm means ready. My phone lights again. The sender is named this time. The chair. A simple message. Thank you for the plain language. Keep it that way. I put the phone down. Outside, the river turns like a patient machine. Inside, the system writes and writes. Somewhere in the writing, a bird watches from a high rail and waits to see whether I will carry a standard in my pocket or set it in the middle of the room and leave it there where everyone can see the weight and shape of it. The door to the corridor opens. A shadow pauses on the carpet. Footsteps choose my direction. The day decides its next sentence. The footsteps belong to the chief executive. He does not come into my office often. Today he does. He stands at the threshold long enough to make the doorway feel like a stage and then steps in and closes the door as if he is trying not to wake anyone. You did well. The sentence is short and plain and it lands like a coin I will not spend. I thank him and wait. He looks at the river and then at the whiteboard and then at me. We will formalize your authorization this afternoon. There will be an internal note and a line in the next company-wide message. For now, I want you to begin the transition plan that you mentioned in the room. The list of chores that keep the machine clean. Meet with people as you see fit. If anyone gives you trouble, tell them I asked you to do this. I say I will. He nods. His hand touches the back of a chair and lifts away as if the chair were hot metal. And about the lunch invite you received. He keeps his voice neutral. I would prefer you did not go alone. He does not ask who sent it. He does not need to. I ask if he expects that person to call on the record. He smiles a little. Expect is a strong word. Count on gravity. The rest is weather. He leaves and the room feels larger by one measured breath. I send 3 calendar holds, one for the operations team to settle the checks that still live only in my notes, one for the client success group to align how we talk about conditions without sounding like we are asking for favors, one for the group that maintains the integration points that look trivial and behave like heart valves. I add a 4th hold for a one-on-one with Marcus. I want the demo environment to become a quiet dashboard that we can roll into any room on short notice. The operations meeting starts with coffee and ends with a list that looks like a recipe for a slow soup. The kind that tastes right only if you let it simmer without watching the pot. We assign names to checks. We decide which checks must have 2 names for a month before they can fly solo. We set a rule for notes. Notes that survive the removal of a name are the only notes we keep. The team leads write the rule on the last line without commenting on the power of it. I let that silence sit. It is the right kind. Client success asks for metaphors they can use without sounding cute. I give them 3 and tell them to choose only one for any conversation. Flame and pan for heat. Ligaments for soft knowledge that holds a body together. The color of the tile for the difference between appearances and results. We practice sentences that do not blame and do not beg. We practice the tone that sits between patience and urgency. They leave with cards in their hands and a touch more steadiness in their shoulders. The integration group brings a map that looks beautiful and lies. I ask for the map that shows the ugly bits. The map appears like a friend who had been waiting outside the door. We circle 3 places where a change of personnel would do more harm than the chart suggests. We agree to draw a small plan for each, not a fix, a way to fail in a box without burning the room. They like that phrase. Failing in a box gives people permission to learn in public without setting off alarms. At noon, I walk to the window near the end of the hall and let the sun press its warm hand on my face. The phone buzzes. The message is an address and a note that says 1 o'clock. Off-site. Back door. No names at the host stand. I copy the address into a note and close the message. I think of the sentence I wrote this morning. If someone invites me into a room with no record, I will invite the record into the room. I slip a small recorder into my pocket. It is the kind you bring to remember what you said, not the kind you bring to catch someone else. My own words are the only words I promise to keep. I tell Marcus where I am going. He does not ask questions. He only asks whether I want him to keep an extra eye on the logs. I say yes. He says already doing it and holds up the wolf mug with ceremonial gravity. The restaurant is a quiet place on a side street that pretends to be a private house. The front door is for people who want to be seen. The text mentioned the back. I walk through a narrow alley that smells like thyme and pots and find a door that is mostly glass. A host greets me with a nod that says my name without saying it. He leads me down a short hall and into a small room with 3 walls and 1 large window that opens to a garden. A person stands with their back to me. When they turn, I recognize the calm eyes from the video frame of yesterday and from a memory in a hallway. The board member who asked what failure looks like from across the street. The voice that used the name Raven on the phone belongs to this face. The recognition makes the room sharper. Thank you for coming. The voice is the same in person. Measured. Kind without trying to please. I sit. The table holds water in a clear pitcher and a bowl of small citrus fruit that smell like summer. No menu. The kind of place where the food arrives because someone thinks you need it. We begin with the weather of adults who make a living by moving things in purposeful ways. The sky. The river. The noise of the street outside that disappears when the window closes. Then we place our hands on the table where our cards would be if we were playing cards. You know why I asked to meet? Because you like mirrors better than shields. A small smile. Mirrors show people to themselves. Shields make people show themselves to others. Both have uses. I wanted to see which one you carry. Neither. I carry a checklist and a pencil. Even better. Food arrives and the room fills briefly with the sounds of plates taking their positions. When we are alone again, the board member speaks without the word Raven. The name is an instrument for the phone. In-person names are heavier. The preservation policy on your folders will remain for a while. That is not a leash. It is a brace while the muscle heals. People will test fences. I find it wise to reinforce them before I ask a person to run through a field. I say that I do not object to braces when they are labeled as braces. I object to walls that look like windows. The board member nods as if noted is a word they will choose to use later. They ask about my standard. The one I set in the room. The one I wrote into the minutes. They ask if I plan to apply it beyond this one model. I say yes. I say that a standard that applies only to a favorite project is a pet and not a principle. They do not flinch at the word principle. Some people flinch. They ask whether I want help. I ask what help means. They say access. Endorsement. A hand when the hallway is crowded and people are trying to nudge you into a smaller shape. I ask the price. They smile at the directness. The price is your attention. We have interests in play. Interests that do not align neatly with the interests of every person whose title is above yours. Your clarity is useful. Your independence is useful. Your record is useful. Keep them and the price is paid. This is the moment when I feel a weight arrive on the table between us. It has no shape I can draw and I know its mass. I sip water to give my face a task. I say I will keep my clarity and my independence and my record whether there is an interest that applauds or not. I say I will not deliver favors. I will deliver facts. If facts are inconvenient, they will arrive anyway. If facts delight, that is a bonus no one should count on. They do not look annoyed. They look more curious. They say good. Then they say something new. They ask whether I would consider running a broader function. Not today, not tomorrow. Not in a way that makes a rumor worth the time it takes to whisper. They ask whether the work I do for one model could become the work I do for the company. They do not promise a title. They offer a field. My first thought is practical. Fields require fences and wells and the habit of walking it every day. My second thought is older. My mother telling me to bring my own tools because other people forget them when it rains. The air changes. A small wind moves the leaves outside the window. I ask what happens to the people who moved my numbers without moving the conditions. The ones who call the color green truth even when telephones are ringing. The board member does not say punished. They say moved. Some people move themselves when the room stops echoing their voices back at them. Some need help moving. Either way, the record will make moving easier. People who believe they own stories do not enjoy rooms with records. We finish the meal without speaking about food. We return to the single subject that stands quietly in the middle of the table and demands respect. When we stand to leave, the board member extends a hand. The shake is firm and brief. One more thing, you will be asked to make a private exception before the week ends. Refuse it and say the refusal out loud. Then send me an email with one sentence. The standard stands. I say I will. We walk through the hall and out separate doors. In the alley, the time smells like a memory of a house I have never lived in. Back at the office, Marcus sends a window that contains a single word. Lunch. I send back a single word, productive. He replies with a tiny wolf and the phrase caution is healthy. The afternoon is a steady drum of chores. I sit with the younger analysts again and ask them to show me notes that would survive without their names. Some notes do. Some need work. We edit together. We make the sentences shorter. We take the romance out of the verbs. We put the important nouns where eyes land first. Legal confirms the company message will go out in the morning. Finance asks for a draft of the plain language, next steps for the operating review. I send a page with a title so dull it feels almost rude. What we will do in the next 2 weeks. The bullet points are chores no one will brag about. Call schedules. Check ownership. Document locations. Backup routines. Approvals for when approvals matter and a line for when they do not. I list the names next to the chores and the dates next to the names. I remove any sentence that could not be checked by a person with 10 minutes and a calendar. Near 5, a small ripple moves across the floor and gathers at my doorway. Leon stands there with a folder and 2 colleagues in his shadow. He asks to sit. I say yes and offer water. He says the right things. He congratulates me on the clarity of the record. He says we will all be stronger for it. He asks for the demo script in full and for a copy of the raw log that shows the attempts to delete. He says it will help us train our teams to respect boundaries. The sentences are arranged like furniture staged for a buyer. All attractive. Too neat. I give him the demo script without the parts that depend on experience you cannot paste. I refuse the raw log request. I offer a summary instead. He asks why. I say because the raw log contains sensitive information and because people who failed do not need their names printed on a wall to learn. He says he understands. His eyes do not. He thanks me and leaves a card on the table out of habit. The card has his name and a title that will be a different title soon. The room feels heavier for a minute. I stand and walk to the window and place my palm on the cool glass. The river moves like a person walking while thinking about a letter they are writing in their head. I let the image last until it wants to fade. I return to the desk and open the notebook. I write a short line. Dull is wealth. Dull is work that no one else has to redo. A message appears on my screen from the chair. It contains one sentence. Draft the outline for a broader function based on your standard. No title. No promise. Just the outline. I reply with a yes and a date. The date is soon and not desperate. I pack the cable and the markers and the folder. I leave the small recorder on my desk and plug it into a charger. I do not need it to hold a memory of today. I need it ready in case tomorrow offers a room with a different shape. As I step into the hall, my phone buzzes with a message from the unknown number that now has a face. It is not a greeting. It is a sentence with edges. I will ask for your help again. It will be in public. I do not reply. My standard is not a thing I wear like a badge. It is a table I carry with me. If someone wants me to work on their problem, the table comes with me. We will place it in the middle of the room. We will lay the facts on it. We will invite the record to sit down. Then we will see who stays in the room. The elevator doors open on a city that has traded afternoon glare for evening shine. The first stars hide behind the sky glow and wait for night to claim the field. I walk out past the guard, and the glass and the smell of lemon. I think of my mother and the squeak of her shoes after a long shift and the smile that told you the squeak did not matter. I think of my father and the wrench he would not replace because he knew how it felt in his hand in winter when metal burns cold. I think of the tile that went gray and then green and the sound it made in a room where people finally listened. I think of a name that is not a name and a face that invited me to bring a mirror. I think of the sentence I will say when the private exception arrives. The standard stands. On the street, the crosswalk light turns white. I step off the curb and carry my table in my head. Somewhere above the buildings, a bird draws a circle in the air and watches to see whether I will set the table down where everyone can see it or carry it into a corner and ask the room to trust me. I know which choice I will make. I knew it the first time I wrote a note that would still be true if my name were removed. The exception arrives on a Wednesday that pretends to be harmless. The company-wide message with my authorization goes out at 9. By 10:30, the floor smells like fresh coffee and printed paper and small relief. At 11, a calendar invite appears with a subject I recognize from 100 cautious corridors. Alignment touchpoint. No agenda. No room. I decline and reply with one sentence. Please include agenda and attendees. 5 minutes later, a second invite arrives, this time with a room number and a list of names that bend the hallway when they walk. I accept. The chair has already told me what I would need to do when the private exception comes. Refuse it and say the refusal out loud. Then send one sentence. The standard stands. The room is 2 floors above mine and has a view of the harbor that is usually reserved for donors and visiting dignitaries. The table is long and pale, and the chairs could pass for quiet sculptures. The chief executive sits at the head. Leon sits 2 seats down with a folder that looks heavier than paper. Across from me is the board member with the calm eyes. Today those eyes hold less sky and more weather. A banker I have never met sits at the far end with a smile he gives to people and not walls. We begin with courtesy and a diagram of realignment that might happen if the market agrees to be polite. The banker speaks in clauses that hold hands so they do not trip. Synergy, rationalization, focus. There is a phrase about enabling leaders to lead. The phrase floats over the table like a molecule in search of a bond. The chief executive clears his throat. We are considering a strategic purchase. If it goes forward, there will be a transition period. We would like to ensure continuity without unnecessary friction. We would like your help in smoothing the path. I ask what the path is made of. They show me a map where lines connect boxes, and the lines are labeled with words that pretend to be highways. Operating cadence, workstream vector, customer touch layer. I look at the place where the lattice actually lives and see a stamp that says legacy. My hands stay flat on the table. My voice does not move. You are asking me to call the old work legacy and the new work core, while the new work leans on the old work like a man leaning on a railing that he has not checked for rust. The banker smiles a different smile. He is here to win the kind of agreement that looks like consent when filmed from the right angle. He says that optics matter to markets and to people who make markets by speaking calmly into cameras. He says it would be helpful if I would let the new leadership team present the Atlas Lattice as a unified story early, while I continue quietly under the new banner, ensuring that the details line up. He says the word quietly as if he is offering me an afternoon off. I keep my gaze on the map. I do not look at the board member. Not yet. I say the new leadership team can present a unified story when the story is true as told and not 2 stories shaved until they fit together in a picture. Until then, the standard applies. Attribution, authorization, correction in the archive when anything drifts from what the system says is real. The chief executive shifts his weight. Leon lifts his folder and puts it down. The board member breathes in through the nose and keeps the breath. This is the moment when the name that is not a name steps forward. The board member speaks with the voice that called itself Raven when it lived in the phone. They do not look at me. They look at the banker. The standard applies. We brought her here because the standard applies. The banker does not frown. He says, of course. He says it lightly. He says it in the tone of a person who intends to test each plank in the fence later. We move to the exception. It arrives wrapped in niceness. A 1-page proposal slides across the table and rests in front of me like a napkin under an expensive glass. The proposal asks for a grace period during which the attribution in the minutes can be delayed in public materials for the sake of brand coherence during the transaction. The phrasing is careful enough to pass a cursory inspection. The effect is not. It is a knife with its blade painted the color of the table. I read the page to the end. Then I read it again because I want my refusal to cut exactly where it needs to cut. I place my palm on the paper to hold it still. I speak without raising my voice. No. The room tenses and then relaxes in the way that means a person has done the thing they were expected to do and feared to do. I add the line I promised to add out loud. The standard stands. Attribution in the record. Authorization in the record. Correction in the record. My voice does not waver. I keep my eyes on the banker until he stops smiling. The chief executive nods once. The board member nods once. Leon looks relieved in the way of a person who realizes a test he would have failed has been canceled. The banker files the smile and replaces it with a professional interest. He asks if I am aware of the opportunities that come with being seen as a unifying figure. I say I am aware of the risk of being used as a shield for decisions that would not stand if the room had mirrors. The board member speaks again, this time with the weight of their seat. No exceptions. We will live with the standard, or we will live somewhere else. The meeting ends not with applause, but with a silence that sits down in a chair and crosses its legs. The kind of silence that lets the next steps be taken without loudness. I walk back to my floor with the refusal sitting in my chest like a warm coin. I open my notebook and send the promised sentence to the chair. The standard stands. The reply arrives so quickly it feels like a relay. Good, now publish. Publish what? Publish the thing the company has only said in pieces and in rooms that do not record. Publish the standard itself. Put it in a place that claims a name larger than a project. Put it in the governance repository. Put it in the handbook. Put it where new people will read it and where old people will mutter about it, and then follow it because the room with the camera expects them to. I open a fresh document with a title that wears plain clothes. Operational Attribution and Integrity Standard. The first line explains why a standard exists. Because memory is shorter than a quarter and longer than a day, and because money follows the path of least resistance unless rails are laid. I write the 3 pillars in their unfancy words. Who did the work is recorded where anyone who matters can see. Who is authorized to operate is recorded where anyone who matters can check. When a number leaves its conditions behind, a note is attached where anyone who matters will trip over it. I add provisions that sound like common sense and behave like law when the room gets hot. Demo environments must show at least 1 safe failure and 1 honest recovery. Logs are witnesses and not weapons. Raw logs stay inside the box. Summaries travel. Names are not posted on walls. Habits are. Replace what a person does with 2 people for 1 month before you remove the first name. If a meeting has no record, it is not a meeting where a decision may bind the person who keeps the lights on. Everyone signs. No signature means no show. I read the draft aloud once in here where the breath must sit and where the commas must go. I send it to legal and the chair. The chair replies with 3 words that are not dramatic. Put it out. Legal adds the sentence that gives it teeth. Approved by the board on this date. I commit the document to the governance repository with a message that would satisfy a monk. Add standard. Then I post a link in the internal channel where people say they read things when they want other people to know they read things. By mid-afternoon, the floor is a slow river of reactions. Relief. Resentment dressed as concern. Questions that are really statements of fear. Questions that are really invitations to trust. I answer with the same tone for each. Calm, direct, specific. I quote the standard and the part of the system where the claim lives. I do not argue. Arguing is a sport that feeds itself and forgets what it was hungry for. I explain. Explanation is work. Work tires the mouth and sharpens the hands. Just before 4, the sabotage arrives in its small, predictable way. One of the integration points that should be a clean line becomes a crease. A scheduled job is resubmitted with a parameter that looks correct to a tired eye and wrong to a person who knows where the debris hides. The tile stays green. The phones begin to ring in a corner of the building that does not share a floor with us. I feel the shape of the trick, and I do not let adrenaline pretend to be insight. I open the log. I watch the diff. Marcus is already typing. He sends me a line with the speed of a person who enjoys catching mosquitoes with chopsticks. See the shift. I see the shift. It is the kind of change that lets someone claim the system failed under the weight of a new standard and not under the weight of a small dishonesty. We move to a public war room, not a secret chat. A room with a camera and a shared screen and a link posted in the channel where people with responsibility tend to live. I open the checklist that begins with the words what holds the model up. I speak the steps and ask questions that do not accuse. Who moved this? Why? What ticket references the move? Where is the approval? The answers locate themselves quickly because the room is bright with witnesses. The person who resubmitted the job says they were told to do it for speed. Who told you? A pause, a name that usually lives in the soft shade near power. The name is said out loud. The pause that follows is heavy but honest. We reverse the parameter. The phones stop ringing. Marcus flips the knob in the demo environment for the benefit of the room. The tile goes gray and then green in the way that teaches more than slides. I read from the standard. Raw logs are witnesses and not weapons. Names are not posted on walls. Habits are. The habit we will keep is that jobs run with parameters that match the documented recipe unless a ticket and an approval say otherwise. The habit we will discard is that speed means giving the system a wink and hoping it does not tell on us. The war room closes with a list of chores and a calm that feels earned and not borrowed. I feel the ache that comes after a race that no one asked to run and everyone finished anyway. My phone vibrates with a message from the board member. 2 sentences I can hear even when I close my eyes. Good use of the room. Mirrors only. Evening leans in through the glass. The harbor ships switch on their lights. I print the standard and place it in a folder next to the notes I carry when I teach the younger analysts. I add a small line at the bottom of the last page. If you forget every word above, remember this. Green can lie. People cannot. Ask the room for a record and put your name next to your work. Then go home and eat dinner. At 6, I am on my way out when Leon catches up with me near the elevators. He looks like a man who has looked into a mirror and decided to keep looking. He says he tried to move too fast and too quietly and that he will change his habits or find a job that does not require them to change. I do not say good. I say this is how we will work now. He nods. He does not ask for mercy. He does not ask for credit. The elevator arrives and we stand in a metal box like 2 people who both live in a city that teaches lessons through repetition. On the ground floor, the guard lifts his eyes and then returns to his crossword. Outside, the evening smells like a street vendor selling sweet bread somewhere in a lane I cannot see. I walk toward the train that carries people who are tired and decent and going home. My phone rings once, and I expect the voice that calls itself Raven. It is not Raven. It is the chair. There will be a full hands meeting next week. I want you to present the standard to the company. No theater. The way you did it in the boardroom. If there is pushback, let it land and then point to the record. Do not sell it, show it. I say yes, I mean yes. I end the call and keep walking. The night is ordinary and beautiful in the way streets sometimes are when the city has decided not to test you. Above the buildings, a bird draws another slow circle. The trick at the integration point did not work because the room was full of mirrors and not shields. The exception in the small room did not stand because the sentence stood taller. The standard stands. I reach my stop and the train arrives with its familiar sigh. I stand near the door and rest my head against the cool glass. I think about how a standard is not a speech. It is a table that travels. In the morning, I will set the table in another room. People will bring their plates of habit and their cups of pride, and we will sort what feeds us from what makes us sleepy. The train moves. The windows show me the city in slices. My reflection looks back at me and does not ask for applause. It asks for constancy. I can give that. I have been giving it since I learned to write notes that stay true when my name is gone. When the train slows for my stop, the phone lights one more time, a message without salutation. You chose the mirror. Good, keep choosing it. I put the phone away and step onto the platform. Somewhere a tile has just turned green. I hear the quiet sound it makes in the throat of a building that has decided to tell the truth. The all hands meets me like a tide. The room is too large for comfort and big enough for truth. Screens hang from the ceiling like quiet moons. The crowd settles in pockets. Some people lean forward, some cross their arms. I stand with my notebook closed and the standard open on the first slide. No music, no sizzle, just words that plan to be lived. I begin with the 3 lines that have carried me through rooms this week. What holds the model up? What makes it fall? What keeps it standing after we leave? I speak them slowly so they can land and so no one can say they did not hear them. I tell the story of a tile that went gray and then green again. I tell it in the size of a human breath. Gray is not shame. It is a signal. Green is not glory. It is a promise kept. I point to the clause that sits under the forecast like a beam under a floorboard. I say the beam is now stamped into our plans. We will not nail rugs over it and pretend it is not there. I show the standard in plain words. Who did the work is recorded where it can be seen. Who is authorized to operate is recorded where it can be checked. When a number leaves its conditions behind, a note is attached so no one trips in the dark. I read the line about logs being witnesses and not weapons. I say that names do not go on walls. Habits do. I say that if a meeting does not have a record, it is a conversation and not a place where a decision can bind the person who keeps the lights on. Hands go up. Some questions try to dress worry as principle. Some are just honest worry. Will this slow us down? I say it will slow the parts of us that hurt us. It will speed the parts that pay us. Who decides when to make an exception? The room does in public with a record. What if a client insists on a change of personnel? Then we show them the map and we walk it together. If they still insist, We lower the load rather than pretend the bridge is stronger than it is. No one cheers, and that is fine. This is not a pep rally. It is a kitchen lesson. Wash the pan now, and the next meal will not taste like smoke. I end with a small demo that Marcus loves. He nudges a knob and the tile goes gray. I call out the simple steps that bring it back. A voice from the back says, "Thank you," and it does not sound like show. It sounds like relief traveling through a body that was braced for a fall. When the session ends, people line up not to praise or complain, but to ask short questions about real chores. Where do we put the training clips? Which page owns the risky routine from last year? Who signs for a swap on the Tuesday check? I answer until the line is a trickle. I write 3 names and 2 dates in my notebook and star them. Dull is wealth. Dull is how this will stick. In the afternoon, the company message lands with the formal words that make new habits official. The standard is adopted. The governance repository holds it. The minutes carry the vote. The video is in the archive with a caption that says what it is. I print the page and slip it under my notebook cover. The way a person tucks an old photo behind a mirror frame. Work changes shape in small ways that feel large in the hands. The integration group posts their ugly map next to the pretty one. A junior analyst publishes a guide to checks that would survive without her name. Client success retires a slide with glossy arrows and replaces it with a simple table of what we do and when and who watches. The operations team starts a practice I did not ask for. On Fridays, the lead who ran the week writes 5 lines in a channel that anyone can read. What held? What bent? What almost went gray? What we fixed? What we will watch next? Not everyone stays. That is the nature of a room that begins to carry mirrors. One director asks for a transfer, and another takes a call in a glass box that ends with a handshake that means goodbye. Leon knocks on my door with a face that looks more like a person and less like a public role. He says he will learn the habit of walking the map instead of narrating it from a balcony. He asks if I will meet once a week through the summer and hold him to it. I say yes. I do not gloat. There is no room for gloating when maintenance is the work. The client who wrote at 6 on a Sunday signs a renewal with a sentence that names the lattice as the reason. Another client adds a clause that matches our standard word for word and thanks us for teaching them a way to keep their own tiles honest. The finance team sends me a note with a number that is not a boast. Reduction in churn is not a headline. It is a quiet line that shows up for work. I keep teaching. On a wet Tuesday, I gather the younger analysts in a room that smells like dry erase ink and coffee and ask them to bring me one note they would be proud to see without their name attached. We put the notes on the table. We read them aloud. We change one verb in each. We remove adjectives that sound like ambition and keep nouns that behave like screws and bolts. I tell them a story about a check that prevented a fire no one would have thanked them for. They tell me a story about a fix that broke a thing we needed to see broken. We laugh in the tired way people laugh when the job is hard and worth it. Raven calls once more, not a number without a name. The board member with the calm eyes asks a single question. Is the standard working? I say it is heavier than a speech and lighter than a law, and it moves when people pick it up. They say that is the answer they hoped for. They do not mention shields or mirrors. They do not ask for favors. They thank me and end the call like a person who knows not to keep a good tool out longer than needed. There is one more test, and it comes not as sabotage but as convenience. A partner in another business unit asks me to bless a shortcut for a launch that is late. The shortcut would hide a risk behind a green tile for a week while a fix ships. We could do it. It would probably be fine. I look at the message for a long time, then I send a reply that carries no judgment and all the weight it needs. The standard stands. We can lower the load. We cannot paint the beam. I offer to join a call with the client and explain. They accept. The call is awkward for 4 minutes and honest after that. The launch shifts. No one posts a meme. No one suffers a fire. And then the day comes when I no longer need to say the standard out loud. Other people say it before I can. They quote the line about raw logs being witnesses and not weapons. They say the sentence about meetings with no record being conversations and nothing more. They remind one another that 2 names write a check for a month before 1 name can leave. They roll the demo cart into rooms without asking me to push. Marcus puts a small sticker of a wolf on the side of the cart. People pat the wolf for luck and then do the work so luck has nothing to carry. The chair asks me to draft the outline for the broader function I once described at a table with citrus on it. I write it like a map, not a hierarchy. A field with wells and fences and paths that we walk every day. Attribution, authorization, conditions attached to numbers, demo that shows a failure and a recovery, teaching is a loop and not an event. The outline travels upstairs and comes back with a green check that is not a tile. A real one, the kind that means go. Months move like a train that runs on time. We do not win awards for this. We do not need them. We keep clients. We keep people. We keep our word inside our work. When I stand in a small kitchen on a Saturday and rinse a cup, I can feel my shoulders lower in a way they did not lower a year ago. A standard has a physical weight. When a company carries it together, one person's back stops carrying more than it should. On a late afternoon, the sky pulls a pale line over the river, and the building fills with the sound of shoes and voices that want dinner. I sit alone in the small room with the kind light and open my notebook to the first page where I wrote 2 words on a morning when a dot turned red. Due bill. I turn pages and see the clean lines of chores, the neat dates of signatures, the short sentences that traveled into minutes and out into habits. I write one last line under the old words. Paid, and not by accident. I close the notebook and carry it to the window. The city offers its ordinary beauty again. Buses breathe. A cyclist stands on a pedal at a light like a figure in a photograph. I think of my mother's shoes that squeaked and did not matter and my father's wrench that outlived the season. I think of a tile that went gray on cue and green with a small human sound. I think of a voice that asked me to bring my own mirror and then did not ask again. I turn off my screen and the room shows me my reflection. I do not look heroic. I look like a person who writes things down and keeps showing up. That isn't. I lock my drawer and pocket my badge and step into the hall. The carpet gives nothing away. The air smells faintly of lemon and paper. At the elevator, I press the button and the soft click reminds me of a small sound from a night that began this story. The doors open. I step in with my table in my head. Whether the room is a boardroom or a pantry or a client's tired conference call, the table will go to the middle. The record will take a seat. People will decide who they are. The model will stand because people stand around it and say the truth out loud. The doors close and the numbers count down, and the building hums like a patient engine that has learned how to tell the truth and how to keep standing after the room is empty.